during the day. But I would just summarize some of the key elements listed in the joint statement across various domains. First domain, I would say, would be of technology. Now, even before I go to what's in the joint statement, it is important to flag that when the Honorable Prime Minister and the President held their discussions in the White House after the ceremonial welcome, technology featured very prominently in the discussions. And not technology just in a single subdomain or a limited segmentation of it, but technology cooperation across most of the ecosystem that pertains to it, which would include technology transfer, which would include technology trade in technology products, technology services, which would also include working together to create research, co-produce and work on developing technologies across different sectors, which would also include the technology capacity building cooperation between the two countries. Now, if you look at specific subdomains which are listed in the joint statement, you will find that there are roughly 20 to 25 areas of technology partnership that have been identified in the joint statement as a direct result of the discussion between the two leaders earlier in the White House. So you have a full set of technology partnership areas in the field of semiconductors, whether it is the decision of Micron to set up an assembly line and test facility in India, with a total investment amounting to roughly $2.75 billion. Of course, it would have a large chunk from Micron, but there will be other investors too. LAM, the company LAM's decision to train 60,000 Indian engineers, which falls more in technology capacity building engagement. The decision of the advanced applied materials to invest $400 million to establish a collaborative engineering center, again heavily centered on technology. If you go to the entire domain of initiative on critical and emerging technologies, you would find that there was a decision today to set up a quantum coordination mechanism and also the Quantum Information and Science and Technology Agreement. Also partnership in several plurilateral engagements which focus on technology areas, Quantum Entanglement Exchange, Quantum Economic Development Consortium, a research partnership program under the US-India Science and Technology Endowment Fund, which focuses more on joint development and commercialization of AI and quantum technologies. Critical area of HPC, high-powered computing technology, and development of source codes, and the regulatory easing in that space. So the 5 subdomains of technology I mentioned, you can easily add 2 more to that. One is relating to the regulatory easing. Google's AI Research Center also announced to continue its investing through the $10 billion digitalization fund. In S&T, there were 3 or 4 critical technology-related announcements which were made, which are reflected in the joint statement. one of which was implementation arrangement between the NSF and the Department of Science and Technology of India relating to cyber physical systems and secure and trustworthy cyberspace. This area is particularly important given the increasing and increasingly complex and increasing number of cyber-related threats that are critical infrastructure in particular faces in both the countries. Signing of an implementation arrangement between NSF and the Ministry of Electronics of India for funding of joint projects in applied areas of research, which would include semiconductors, next generation communication, cyber security, green technologies, intelligent transport system, etc. Technology space then also continues into defense, where one of the landmark announcements done earlier this morning by GE was the signing of an MOU with HAL for production of GE 414 aero engine for the India's light combat aircraft. There was also an announcement on India-US Defense Industrial Cooperation Roadmap, which also has a heavy segment of technology. There are then technology-related announcements in the field of energy. There are good 6-7 of them. So if you put them all together, you will find that very clearly technology, in particular advanced technology, across various domains, whether it is the defense domain, whether it is in the area of space or other domains, it has been one of the most important outcomes, substantive outcomes from the visit and from the discussions between the leaders. Besides the technology-related segment, another area of important outcome has been people-to-people ties. This finds manifestation in a decision by the US side, and both India and US have agreed that US will start the process to open 2 new consulates in India, one in Ahmedabad, one in Bengaluru. India will open its consulate in Seattle and 2 other places which are to be determined later. Defense has been another important area of significant outcomes during this visit. One element of it which I've highlighted is the agreement to produce GE 414 engine. The other elements include India's plan to procure MQ-9B Reaper drones from the US. There have also been some decisions and announcements with regard to placement of defense personnel in each other's facilities to better understand different systems and their operations. We have also announced commencement of negotiations with the US Department of Defense for concluding a security of supply arrangement, as also discussions on the reciprocal defense procurement agreement. Energy, as I mentioned earlier on, is another area where we have seen significant and considerable number of outcomes. And these are all available for you to see in the joint statement. Trade has also been another focus area of priority discussions between the 2 countries, and that also featured in today's discussion. Now, one of the key elements in this has been that out of the 7 WTO disputes between India and the US, there has been a resolution for 6 of the outstanding WTO disputes. There have also been cooperative understandings with regard to upskilling of employees, arrangements between the US Small Business Administration and the Indian Ministry of Micro, Small and Medium Enterprises, announcements of substantial investments by companies like Boeing, 100 million in this case on infrastructure and programs to train pilots in India, etc. So a fairly important set of announcements. Space, that has been another area which has seen important outcomes being announced today. The one in particular needs mention is the signing by India. Ambassador Sandhu signed it yesterday, is Artemis Accords. India has become signatory to the Artemis Accords, which would essentially open up a new area of partnership between Indian Space Research Organization and NASA and other relevant entities for cooperation in the field of outer space, in particular relating to exploration initiatives on Moon and other outer space objects. The other important segment which I should highlight is India's decision and the US welcome of that decision for us to join the Mineral Security Partnership, which essentially opens up opportunities for India and the US to cooperate in this entire field of critical minerals, which is so important for strategic new industries coming up in the field of electric mobility, energy transition, in particular green transition, etc. So if you were to, if I was to kind of wrap it up in some sense, you will find, expressions of these key elements of day 2 of Prime Minister's visit and also his engagements yesterday reflected in multiple statements by Prime Minister today, including in particular his congressional address. So Prime Minister spoke of in this visit, one, a new chapter of relations. He spoke of new direction and energy. 3, he emphasized on the strong and futuristic partnership. 4, resilient supply chains was an important aspect which he mentioned in his statements. Mutual trust and shared strategic priorities. Friendship between the two leaders, the Leadership Connect, which has been one of the principal drivers of such a rapid and large set of achievements that we have managed to register in the relationship. And again, a Leadership Connect, a friendship, which is not just for the benefit of 2 of our countries, but is also something which is very, very relevant for the entire humankind and the global peace. The strong strategic partnership, the strong Leadership Connect, President Biden himself mentioned that both India and US have democracy in their DNA, is a proof essentially of the power of democracy. Of the value-based relationship, but a value-based relationship which also delivers for the respective countries as also for the relationship. And you find expressions of these sentiments in these substantive outcomes which I have listed. So a visit which has been extremely rich on form, but equally, if not more rich on substance. I listed out some of it for you. Discussions, achievements, outcomes, focused not just on the individual items, but also focused on how those outcomes need to be achieved in a value-based framework. Working in this value-based framework on different aspects, the 2 leaders sketched their vision of the relationship, which, as I said, is pathway for a future cooperation and the convergence of strategic interest. The 2 also, working in this value system vision, spoke of the need to listen to the voices, other voices which are there in the world for their own benefit. spoke about the vigor in the relationship, and I mentioned these examples clearly pointed out, and the new ventures, the ventures which cut across space of technology, trade, energy, space, critical minerals, etc. And the last, to top it all, that all this in an absolutely trustworthy, reliable way, in a manner that works for the relationship, but also works for the regions and working for the global good. All in all, a truly path-breaking, ongoing visit of the Honorable Prime Minister, and we hope that the set of engagements that are anticipated for tomorrow will add on additional value, more substance, show us maybe newer domains in which the two countries and the two systems can partner more strongly to even forge a deeper, more extensive and a stronger partnership between the two countries. Just one last word on the Honorable Prime Minister's congressional address. You all must have watched. We saw many of you, if not all of you, in the U.S. Congress. You clearly saw everything that Honorable Prime Minister said. The extent to which, how deeply it resonated with the congressmen and the senators present in the Congress, how the address brought out Honorable Prime Minister's vision of India that is transforming under his leadership in the last 9 years, how he sees important developments in important regions of the world, and his perspective on some of the global challenges such as climate change, challenge of terrorism that we all face, etc. I think what we saw today at the Congress today is unlike anything that we may have seen in some time. But all in all, a truly special visit, exceptional visit, and which we hope, which we are confident that would build on to this relationship and take it to higher reaches further. I would stop here, and if there are questions, I'll be trying to take them. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. Before we take the questions, ground rules, please introduce yourself and the organization that you represent. Ayush, can I start with you?
Good evening, Ayush Agarwal from ANI. So I have two questions. My first is, since we know that cross-border terrorism and Pakistan was part of the conversation between the two leaders, was there any sort of discussion or request made by India regarding the extradition of Tabur Rana, the Pakistani terrorist? Second question is, during the bilateral meetings between the two leaders, was there any discussion on having a free trade agreement between the two countries? Any prospects for an FTA?
Can you just repeat the second part of your question? Was there agreement on a free trade agreement? What did you say?
Any prospects for an FTA?
Prospects, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, Siddhant, can we go ahead with you?
Hi, sir, Siddhant from Beyond. How much there was a conversation on China and aggressive Chinese actions in the Indo-Pacific and across the world as well, if you can talk about that, sir?
Yeah, just 1 second. Okay, China and discussions on that. Yeah, Manish?
Manish Chand, India Rights Network. Sir, President Biden in his ceremonial welcome spoke quite a bit about Indo-Pacific, Quad, and later in the Congress speech, Prime Minister spoke about the dark clouds, of course, and connectivity and all that. Clearly, these were obliquely targeted at China. How much of China wasn't discussed between the two leaders? And any concrete plans for intensifying cooperation in the Indo-Pacific? Thank you.
Why don't I come back another round of questions? So, we take 3 questions.
Thank you. Look, when besides the reference in the Congress to the challenge of terrorism, The reference clearly brought out, if you heard, Prime Minister said that even after the 2 decades of 9/11 and 1 decade of 26/11, the problem of terrorism remains a pressing challenge for the global community. Clearly, what he was highlighting was the need for the international community to recognize that the people who sponsor terrorism, support terrorism, they continue to pose a serious challenge to the safety and security of our societies and have to be very sternly and firmly dealt with. When the Honorable Prime Minister and the President held their discussions, all aspects of such global challenges were discussed between the two, and how India and US could cooperate to mitigate, address, and try and deal with this challenge as comprehensively as possible. That was also discussed between the two leaders. And going forward, it would be our effort to see how some of those discussions can translate into concrete cooperative decision between India and the US. Bilateral FTA, prospects of bilateral FTA. Look, as I mentioned, cooperation, bilateral trade cooperation featured quite extensively in the discussions and also in the outcome statement that I mentioned. Currently, India and US bilateral trade is a little over $190 billion between the two countries. And as Prime Minister said in his press remarks after the discussion, US is India's largest trading partner. That trade takes place in a certain framework between the two countries. Free trade area agreements, by their nature, are very, very extensive and require discussions and negotiations over a scope which is defined between the two countries. So, as such, the prospects, excuse me, the discussions focused more on what measures do we take to expand our trade engagement, both in trade in goods and trade in services. Also, what steps can be taken to ensure that the capital flows between the two economies increase and are made more efficient. Indian side, we did talk about importance of talking on the critical minerals agreement, which at least is a limited domain trade engagement which is possible. So all these things were on the table in terms of discussion, but prospects of FTA, I think, is further down the line for both of us to build on and see how we can progress that. Manish, your question, and Siddhant, your question earlier on China. Look, it's, as I mentioned in my opening remarks, both Honorable Prime Minister and the President focused on the challenges that our strategic interests face all over different parts of the world. Naturally, in this regard, the developments in the Indo-Pacific area have always been an important area of cooperation between India and the US. And that cooperation takes place across multiple domains. One, It takes place through our individual partnerships with the countries of the Indo-Pacific. Two, it takes place in terms of that the two countries share their assessment of what is the kind of challenges that we face in the region, what we can do together to meet those challenges, what is the nature of those challenges, etc. So in their discussion, the Honorable Prime Minister and the President focused on the nature of the challenges that the two countries face in the Indo-Pacific, including strategic challenges, and what India and US need to do across their different parts of the system to ensure that we mitigate those challenges through our cooperation, but at the same time also harness the opportunities that are available in the Indo-Pacific. Plan to, what was this? Intensify?
Broadly, the questions were on those,
All
right? Maha?
So Maha Siddiqui from NDTV. So since India and US have decided to settle 6 of the trade disputes outside WTO, what is the hurdle now in India getting its GSP status back? Because the joint statement still says that relevant portions will be looked through by the US Congress. If there's bipartisan support from the US Congress, what is preventing the US from returning the GSP status to India?
Is that directly linked to the WTO issue? Anyway, I will. I will leave Foreign Secretary to respond to it, but GSP and WTO disputes are not, they didn't make it. Yeah, fair enough. Prashant, floor is yours.
Prashant Jha from the Hindustan Times. Sir, I'd like you to zoom out if possible and ask you two questions around it. The first is technology, which you said was the big takeaway. Now, the bilateral relationship, in a way, on the question of technology has been defined in the past by contestation, where we have felt that tech transfer has not happened, there has been tech denial. What you mentioned today and what you outlined seems to inaugurate a new chapter in technology collaboration. I wanted to ask you what has changed and what has led to this pretty dramatic shift. The second question, sir, is many of the outcomes that you mentioned are outcomes that will play out in the long term. Some will fructify in the long term. Some will lock our systems in for the long term. So is this a long-term bet now that both countries are making on each other and which will get reflected in our defense, in our tech, in all the domains that you mentioned?
I saw one more hand now. Yeah. Please.
Sir, Ajay from Doordarshan News. Any assessment about the cumulative investment that we are expecting from US from this very...
Sorry, repeat again. What was the question?
The cumulative investments from USA after this very important...
Cumulative investments?
Yeah.
Okay. Do remember that these investments are by private companies, and they may choose to announce it at a suitable location, but I will...
Yeah, absolutely.
So,
sir. And also, how much time it may take for the GE to be endorsed by the Congress, so to say, and what impact does it have on the Make in India prospects under defense sector, sir? Thank you.
So,
okay. Look, to part one of your two-part question on the cumulative investments, I think those details are available in the joint statement that you will, if you go across that, you will find that many companies have announced their decisions even before the joint statement was issued, but those decisions have been captured in the joint statement. So whether it is the investment by Micron in the semiconductor space, whether it is the investment by, I think, Applied Materials, whether Google's decision to move on. You see, some of these, besides the 2-3 that I mentioned, some of these investment may not necessarily may have been announced in a quantified terms straight out, but the decisions to partner between some of these companies or between India and US in some of these areas eventually lead to investment partnerships being built in the private sector, because the nature of partnership in technology is such that at some stage the private sector-based industrial ecosystems will begin to link with each other. Without that, it just remains in theory, it doesn't materialize in practice. And that's the time when the individual companies will begin to move in capital and other associated elements of the ecosystem that are required to be in place to make this cooperation happen. Let me come to WTO, GSP, bipartisan support. You observed that that 6 of the WTO, 7 out of the 7 outstanding disputes, 6 of them, as the joint statement says, have been resolved through discussions. 7th one remains under discussion. The resolution of the WTO dispute has happened between the two governments, the USTR on the US side and the Ministry of Commerce on the Indian side. Those are technical discussions based on which the two countries have decided that 6 of the 7 stand resolved. The GSP, on the other hand, is a congressional issue. It is not an issue which is entirely between the two governments. There are elements of it which pertain to tariff fixation and the trade quantum that takes place under those tariff lines, but it's broadly a much larger issue. It's an issue which is an important priority for us, which we have been taking up consistently and very strongly with the relevant stakeholders in the US system, including the US Congress, to ensure that the GSP benefits are restored for the Indian industry, and we believe that the segments of the Indian industry which benefit from the GSP do make important, valuable contributions to both our economies, and we will continue to take this up very regularly and very intensely with the US Congress so that these benefits can be restored. Prashant, I don't think I understood your question in its entirety, but I'll still try to, say a few points which hopefully address the structure and the specifics of what you what's in your mind. First of all, when you said that these technology cooperation decisions, some of it may happen, some of it may not happen, etc. Some of us may lock in, etc. I think I don't want to be presumptive about I am not presumptive about my intent. My intent is to forge strong technology partnership. My Prime Minister's intent is to achieve everything that we decide to agree on. We don't make an assumption that XYZ will happen, ABCD will not happen. So that's the first part of it, just to make it clear that every single decision that is based on the discussions between the two leaders and the two governments is intended to be taken to its logical conclusion, its fullest term. That's the line of effort and also the line of objective. Technology by its very nature, technology cooperation by its very nature, interfaces quite intensely with the regulatory system on both sides, both on the Indian side and also on the US side. On the US side, we all are aware the regulatory matrix in which they are dealt with, both of the EAR and ITAR. And given that it is crucial to address the regulatory ecosystem which intersects with the technology cooperation, given that criticality, India and US had recently held the first meeting of the strategic trade dialogue. And the whole idea behind the strategic trade dialogue is that we look at regulatory issues more in terms of finding ways to enable our technology cooperation. So we are trying to focus on regulatory issues more from solution perspective, less from the problem perspective. And that is frankly in a way underwritten if you see the extent of technology cooperation decision which have been announced. Many of these will intersect with the regulatory framework in the US and India, and our effort is to intensify our discussions, do them in a manner which become an enabler for our partnership in this technology in the multiple spaces that I mentioned. I think the discussions between the Prime Minister and the President clearly revealed that it is a shared priority. Technology partnership is a shared priority. The decision on G414, on 7 to 8 subdomains of the critical and emerging technologies, the associated set of technology industries in the case of energy transition, clean energy in particular, those are very strong strategic and shared priorities. And the focus on them clearly reveals that our intent going forward is to ensure that we progress in them and we address the process and the procedure and the regulatory issues come in between in a manner that our cooperation in these areas is actually enabled rather than hindered. Thank you. What's the long-term bit?
I think there's a part two saying, is this visit a marker of both countries taking a long-term bet on each other?
You are again in your question embeds in inherent kind of doubt about the intent of. Look, we, as I mentioned in my opening remarks, the form and substance, the richness of form and substance of the visit clearly tells you that it's an exceptional, landmark, path-breaking visit. The decisions taken during the visit are truly transformative across a wide range of areas. Naturally, it is something which is possible when the countries have deep trust in each other and are in it for long term.
Thank you very much, sir. And thank you also to Ambassador Sandhu as well as to Additional Secretary Vani Rao. Thank you all for joining. I know it's a late hour. I appreciate very much a large contingent of media that's come out all the way to follow Prime Minister's visit. We have one more day of packed activities tomorrow. We'll try to keep you updated.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.